Okay.
Nice.
All right. So, Gal Club meeting. Today's meeting is inspired by a quote from The Sound and the Fury. It was uttered by the father, Jason Compton Sr., who's a nihilist. And what he said is, "Purity is a negative state, and therefore contrary to nature." And so, this is obviously a quote related to sexual purity, virginity. But it's also applicable to other things. So I want to first get initial reactions. Does anyone have any strong feelings about this quote either way?
Yeah. I really feel like we kind of have to define what nature is. Is nature just like the majority of what's happening, or is nature more like something, I don't know, kind of ethereal or unattainable or supernatural or something like that?
Well, I think it also, in addition to that, depends on people's definition of purity. Yes, it can mean virginity, and in that way, I would disagree personally. But purity could also mean purity of thought and trying to keep your innocence and thought-wise and not know about some of the horrors of the world. And some people think that might be better for themselves, even though personally I disagree. But it really depends on what you're talking about, I guess.
Okay. What kind of purity are you actually talking about here? Because it's kind of subjective.
Essentially, sexual purity.
Okay.
As I stated earlier, but it can be applicable to
So you mean
however you want to interpret it. I think it's definitely
not screwing around.
sure.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I don't see why it has to be true. Negative, I guess it kind of goes back to what Mylin was saying. I don't know why do negative states have to be contrary to nature. Given that everyone is born pure, does that make it natural to be born pure? Because on one hand, being born pure doesn't make it natural in the sense that birth defects aren't natural, but they happen naturally. But I don't see why something being a negative state has to make it contrary to nature. Is it just its violability that you can stop it, stop being in a negative state?
I think you're definitely hitting at the heart of it. I think this is absolutely is two statements. Purity is a negative state, contrary to nature. So I think we have to kind of decide both of those things separately.
I was thinking of it purity is sort of an empty state and therefore negative, so it's contrary to nature because it can be filled with things supernatural, like sin or
Any other thoughts? Okay.
I just think that it's moving from the standpoint of whether really, as human beings anymore, nature really, I want to say really applies to us. Just because we've really taken ourselves out of the cycle of nature, where there really isn't as much you don't have natural selection, you have us kind of, I don't know, I think that almost in its base, a civilization of humanity is contrary to nature.
But I mean, people can still give you advice and say do what comes naturally. So there's definitely some element of instinct or nature within us, even if we're out of nature out there.
Okay. So let's try and define nature. I feel like that's something we're having a lot of trouble with. I feel like we have nature as in the ecosystem and biology and sort of just trees are natural and things that are growing.
Sure it is all natural.
Sure.
Clothing is all natural.
Cotton fibers and soy-based things, whatever. So there's that kind of nature. And then I think there's another kind of nature, which is, I think, the nature that's more pertinent to this discussion. It's also the one that's sort of harder to articulate. I'm having trouble with it. And I feel like that's the human nature, for example, or just the essence of something is I think what I'm trying to say. So is there another kind of nature I'm missing, or which of these do you think is more applicable?
I think it's more I don't think he meant Constance Senior meant natural. I think he meant the nature of humans. It's contrary to what it means to be human, is what he would say.
as if the biological mode of human history produced someone to be a virgin.
depends. Like, is your duty as a human to just reproduce wantonly, or is it to reproduce, like, deliberately, or...
To carry on with genetics.
So maybe it is best to be pure.
Jason.
Okay. Even if we were to interpret this statement however which way we want, and then accept that it is true, what kind of message is it sending? Is it telling us to not be pure, or to be pure, or what?
Yeah. In the book it's meant, I think, just you shouldn't pay so much mind to it.
All right.
Yeah, first person brief context for those who haven't read it. Jason Thompson Sr. says this to his son Quentin, who is like totally obsessed with Southern values, and including purity and virginity, especially.
Well, the virginity of women.
What you mean, like Southern values, like rednecks or whatever?
No, not
No,
modern Southern values, like
Southern
Southern belles.
Ah, okay.
Ladies and gents.
Okay, okay.
And so because Quentin is like constantly obsessing, like, oh my god, purity, his dad's just like, dude, no, it's whatever. Dude, it's whatever. But yeah. So with that context, any thoughts? I don't know. Does anyone else want to contribute anything about that?
Do you think virginity is a big deal, or do you agree with what is kind of...
Okay, let's take a poll. Let's take a poll. I like your phrasing of it. Okay, so there are going to be two choices in our poll, and that's: do you think virginity is a big deal, or like something important and to be worried about and to be quoted about and discussed, or do you think it's, dude, it's just whatever?
Virginity, like the saving version or the loose
The state of being a virgin.
And the implications of loss of virginity, purity, the whole.
Can I be the middle?
No one may abstain or be in the middle.
I wanted to abstain from this poll.
Tough. Okay, let's start with people. Who thinks it's like a big deal and it's super important?
Can I vote twice?
I'm going.
Yeah.
I think.
I want to vote twice.
Okay.
I wanna, but I have reasons for that. So.
Okay. And then people who think it's whatever, it doesn't matter, and it just is what it is. For the audience watching, David's also.
Yep, me too.
Okay, so let's first hear from Advik, who most vehemently raised his hand. Oh, not vehemently, sort of, before.
Most quickly.
Most assuredly.
Okay.
Raise your hand for the.
So, well, my opinion is that virginity itself is not such a big deal as much as promiscuity is, because it's a life decision. The same as like a decision in your tastes in food, or your tastes in like how you pleasure yourself, be it alcohol or drugs or tobacco, whatever. But in that sense, it is significant because like promiscuity definitely does carry risks with it, mainly STDs. So virginity then becomes a big deal, kind of as an offshoot of promiscuity. That doesn't mean virginity is necessarily the best thing, but it is an important thing. At the same time, like the whole big deal on loss of virginity is, I think, is a big deal, because whether however sexually liberal you are with yourself, the first getting to the point in a relationship with someone, wherever you draw that line, whether it's a one-night stand with the person you meet at the bar or someone you've been married to and you haven't had sex with before marriage, getting to the point of having sexual relations is a significant step in whatever a relationship is between two people. So virginity then, as the first person you find who you cross that line with, becomes significant.
Okay. Anyone else from that side of the poll wants to speak? Yes.
I like what Albert said.
So,
Well, I suppose virginity in itself may not be a huge thing, but deciding to become sexually active, I think, should be a very a big thing, because that's a rather large step, and you shouldn't just, promiscuously throw yourself at every man and say, take my virginity, or
What if
woman.
they're all really good looking?
goodness.
Okay, or woman, whatever.
So heteronormative.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So, yeah, I think that you should definitely, be sure you're with someone who cares about you and someone who will not give you an STD or a child. You don't want it.
Best of you.
Or a child. As a child, or someone who's going to take your virginity and then like run away and leave you like in a state of emotional chaos. So I think there are some things to think about before letting that go.
Do you like
Well, I mean, this is, I suppose just like a really sort of personal viewpoint to myself. This is like absolutely not applicable to the rest of the world. You can't have people live by this, but I personally and a lot of people I know like hold it at this is how people reproduce. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think that being the first priority is like we think about first. So that was my list.
So yeah, this is kind of a transition. Anyone else from our second side of the poll?
Wait, are you asking for counterpoints now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Go for it.
I think it really depends on the scale that you're discussing it. Whether you're talking about individuals or like between individuals in society. On the individual scale, I think it's a quite an important life decision. But if you're talking like in society, which I assume that you are, I really don't see it as a big deal because my philosophy is that you should stay out of other people's business if they're really not hurting anybody. And you have no right to police other people's personal behavior. But yeah, if you're thinking about yourself, then yeah, it could be a big deal.
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of expand on this a little bit with anyway, so projecting here. I think what Avik was saying a little bit, and also kind of Gabby, is that like it marks a transition. It's a transitionary move to lose your virginity, and to move into an era in your life that is, marked with sexual relations. But I don't know. I feel like placing so much importance on this transition makes something that's already important for an individual more frightening, and it just puts a lot of negative feelings around it. And I feel like by de-emphasizing it, we can make that transition a more healthy one for individuals, rather than something that's like so nerve-wracking and like, oh my god, it's this moment.
Maybe some people need that moment though. Like I'm sure just as much as there are people who hate like losing virginity being such a big deal, there are some that need it to be a big deal. I don't think we can ever socially decide where the best place to look at it.
Okay. Well, I actually just got a really good idea, so I'm gonna force a transition here. And that's about loss of virginity, the loss of this thing. And I think that's largely what makes this quote so compelling for me personally. It's just that, you so often hear, like, individual X lost his or her virginity. Like, it's something that you can't regain. Like, it's something, like, most people are here, like, because they've already lost this virginal, pure state over here, and you can't return to it. And that's kind of what makes it that negative state. Would you agree or disagree with that? Disagree.
I disagree.
Expand.
Yeah. Childhood is a negative state. Like you stop being a child, but that doesn't make it contrary to nature. Just because you can, like, I think what we're doing is we're conflating two things that aren't necessarily the same. Like being pure and then always being pure. And there's a difference. Like always being pure may be contrary to nature because everyone has most people have biological impulses to reproduce. But like starting off pure is natural because it's very hard not to.